Hey guys, John here. Today I'm bringing you my full review of the Stormforce pre-built system I did an overview on a little while ago. If you've been waiting for this video, I do apologise for the time it's taken to get out. We've had a lot of launches over the last few weeks, and also reviewing a full system isn't something that I can do very quickly. I am still trying to get my testing methodology down, and plus there's only one of me as well, so sometimes it does take a little while. Now that out of the way, grab a drink and some snacks, and let's give you a look around the system and cover the specs before we get into the nitty gritty. So this is the Stormforce Crystal 0924 PBM, which features the following components. The MSI MAG panoramic case housing the MSI B650M Project Zero motherboard. We've got 32GB of Corsair DDR5 and the AMD Ryzen 7 7800X3D, called by the MSI Coreliquid AIO. There's a 2TB NVMe, of which I use my own equivalent speed drive as it has all my testing software on. 4070 Ti Super, which is the MSI Ventus, and it's all powered by a 750W power supply, more on that part later. At the time of filming this is £1,999 and is built to order with an estimated delivery of 10 to 14 working days. The system was sent in the original case box, which is okay for a system like this. The foam is quite dense that they shipped the case in, and they also added an Instapack to support the graphics card. I would say that one is enough for a model like that because the Ventus is pretty light. However, for higher end systems or higher end cards, I would like to see another one used, plus also an outer box for added protection. Now, also included in the box is a power lead, and you also have a bag with accessories from the different parts that they've used in the system. So motherboard, CPU cover, your PCI brackets and bits and bobs like that. However, I didn't get any original component boxes sent along with the actual system, so just something to bear in mind if you're looking to maybe move the system on in the future. Now, once removing the system, the user also needs to remove the Instapack that's inside that I mentioned. There's also a piece of card mentioning that inside the case, so you certainly won't miss it, which is obviously good. Looking inside the system, it's a very clean build. However, they are using a reverse connect motherboard, which immediately removes a lot of the cable mess. The cables for the MSI AIO were neatly tucked alongside the DIMM slots, and the pump itself looked to be evenly seated. As far as I know, the AIO has got some pre-applied thermal paste, so that should be pretty evenly applied anyway. But looking back on it in all future system reviews, I will be removing the cooler from the CPU just to confirm it's evenly seated. The only other cables visible from the graphics card is the 12V high power adapter. That's the standard adapter, but it's only the double one, so it's not too ugly, especially when it's the only other visible cable in an otherwise cable-free front build. Now, everything else on the system was secure, and I didn't notice any parts that had come loose during shipping, so that's obviously good to see. Taking a look at the back of the case, they've done a great job with cable management. There's no cables covering any ports on the rear connect board either, so you can easily add in additional cables in the future should you wish. They've also added the RGB components onto a hub. I believe that is one that's built into the case, but the header of that hub also goes through the case before connecting, which is a clever little trick, which means it's also less likely to come off during shipping, something that's pretty common in these pre-built systems, and the RGB connectors aren't that solid to connect in the first place anyway. Here we can see more on the power supply too. This is a generic unit with ketchup and mustard cables. I would like to see a branded unit here personally, especially being it's the foundation for the system. It'll likely be fine. The system does have a 3-year collect and return warranty, but for peace of mind and longevity, I'd like to see a branded unit there instead. Now, also something to note, I really hope that they didn't do anything extra for the cable management, given that they were knowingly sending this to me over a usual customer. That kind of thing is really quite hard to gauge without doing a secret shop. Something that I would like to do, but I'm certainly have to wait till my channel is much larger and it's something that I could actually afford to do. Going to the back of the case, one thing that was a nice touch which might help beginner users is that Stormforce took one of the DisplayPort covers out of the GPU and put it into the motherboard DisplayPort, which is a nice little trick to think, oh, it must connect into there, if they didn't know. Now, starting up the system, you'll see a custom Stormforce logo in place of the standard MSI splash screen. One thing I wanted to look for was the enabling of DOCP to enable the RAM to run at its rated speeds, which it has been. Now, earlier on I mentioned I used my own drive to test the system out. However, this does come with Windows 11 Home pre-installed. I also made sure that I used Windows 11 too. I ran it through the usual benchmark suite, all in 1440p. I felt that was going to be the most commonly used resolution with this spec. Now, first of all, we got some CPU benchmarks. This is more a CPU you'd probably buy for gaming with the L3 cache, but I thought I'd test it anyway, as some of you might like to use the system for a mix of work and gaming. Now, the following programs you can all download for free if you like to see how your own system stacks up. I also added in some results from when I tested the 7800X3D versus the 9800X3D, and also a system that I built earlier on the channel in the Corsair 5000D to give us a baseline and also a similar performing system and something to compare to. So first up, we've got the blended render test of the Stormforce system. Shows near identical performance with the 7800X3D that I tested, with only a 1 frame difference in the Monster and Junk Shop tests. In Cinebench, the Stormforce 7800X3D scores 16,800 with a multi-core of 1,800, which is a little bit behind what I found, but given that we have got the silicon lottery, not all of them will perform the same, hence the difference that we see here. We see a similar result in Geekbench 5 as well, where the Stormforce comes out a little bit lower than my CPU, but the gap is only small and nothing really to concern about. And then on to 3D Mark, I tested Time Spy and Steel Nomad, where I compared it to the Corsair 5000D build that I did on the channel. That also has a 7800X2D but a 7800XT, which will be a little bit lower tier than the GPU here, hence the gap, but the Stormforce system is performing very well. Now onto the gaming performance. I tested a range of genres here. I've also got some ray tracing and DLSS tests that I'll go over in a minute too. As expected, the combo of the 7800X3D and the 4070 Ti Super smashes the frames out of the park, with none of the titles that I tested below 100 FPS in the 1% lows, let alone the average frame rates. Some titles are a little bit less consistent with their frames. These titles generally had a higher average anyway, with the exception of Farming Simulator 2025, which at the time I tested was a new title and one that wasn't very well optimised, as you can probably tell. Now additionally, I also did run Starfield with the balanced DLSS setting. That game is very demanding for any card that I test it with. If you want to run it without, you can probably expect the frame rate to be around half what's shown here, but being that it's one of those games that's just difficult to run in the first place, I find it's a lot smoother with a little bit of help. Now Far Cry 6 is another fairly demanding title. I've seen that to favour AMD, but it does still average 107 frames a second, which I think is very good for a title like that. Onto ray tracing and DLSS, and for this I use Cyberpunk 2077, the most intensive title in my suite. This really pushed the system, but as we've seen, a lot of systems can struggle with this anyway. Running the game on high settings without DLSS results in an average of 95 frames with 1% lows at 74. Enabling DLSS nearly doubles the average frame rate to 181 while maintaining 1% low of 112. A little bit of a gap here with the average and 1% low, but everything still feels smooth and responsive. Now turning on ray tracing as expected, this has to really grind out the frames. Ray tracing is one of those things that just needs a little bit of support unless you're running like a higher end card again, so 4080 and up. As you can see here, flicking on DLSS makes the world of difference. You can still maintain that stunning quality that ray tracing offers, but giving you a much smoother over 100 FPS experience. Now if you're wondering about 4K with this system, you'll certainly be looking around console-like frame rates for a spec like this. Generally the 4080 is where you'll be looking to jump up for a 4K, but anything 4040p, this system is really going to be on the money. Now some other things that you might like to know about from the testing. The highest wattage that I saw pulled from the wall was 419. God, that scared you then, didn't it? Let me try that again. 419.3 is the highest wattage that I saw. That was during Cyberpunk. So overall the system is pretty sensible considering what you can do on it. I did expect it to be pulling more, so personally I am pretty pleasantly surprised with it there. Now last little things, CPU and GPU thermals. I'll put the results for those on screen now. I didn't see any thermal throttling, so that's obviously a great outcome, and also no coil whine from the MSI Ventus either, which is something that is a bit of a bugbear for some people. I didn't get any blue screen, so the system was nice and stable. One thing I did miss checking was if they applied any voltage changes in the BIOS, which would help stability, especially if you're undervolt. I have made notes to implement that in the future reviews though, so that is something we'll be checking. And then volume wise, the system was a little bit louder overload. That was during Cinebench the loudest that it got, but you know, it's to be expected. It's going to be a little bit louder. Certainly wasn't anything you couldn't talk over, and also the fan curve is fairly smooth as well. Now last things to talk about, if you want to build the system yourself, if you fancy a bit of DIY, it's actually cheaper to buy it pre-built, which is very surprising. It came to £2,037 with a Windows key, so it's pretty rare that you actually get a pre-built system for less than building it yourself, but the 7800X3D has gone a little bit up following the 9800X3 launch, so the prices will be a little bit lower. By the time of filming, that price is still the same, so for the £1,999, that's a pretty fantastic system for the price. I also checked out some other pre-builts. I couldn't find anything for under 2200 with the same spec. Now that might take into account the inflation of the CPU, but at the time of filming it is a really good price. It's also a great system for those that like matching parts in the system, being that we've got a lot of MSI, so the case, motherboard, GPU and the cooler are all from MSI in there. Now I'm not a fan of the generic looking PSU. That's something that I don't like. I couldn't find any information about it without tearing it all apart, but as I mentioned in future videos, we certainly will do more of a teardown. Now, I'll be honest as well, I've never heard of Stormforce before I covered them, but the experience has been very good. Don't forget the lead time though if you do go to order, so 10 to 14 days. Trustpilot reviews say they can take a little bit longer during busy times, so just something to bear in mind if you're ordering during a sale or a holiday. Out of 2,100 reviews, 93% are positive, which I think is pretty good going. They also seem to be pretty responsive on that site as well to sort out any issues that occur in reviews. Now, all things considered, I'm happy to recommend the system. It's a really clean, visually pleasing build, really well cable management. Hopefully they'll do the same for you as they have on my system here. It performs really well in the titles that I've tested, plus is also cheaper than building it yourself, for something I rarely say. But yeah, that's I think pretty much it for this one. If there's anything that you'd like to know that I haven't covered, obviously please leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And then of course, if there's something else you'd like to see me implement into future system reviews, then please do let me know and I'll make sure to add that in. I'll leave the links for this one in the description box below if you do want to check it out in a bit more detail or even to pick one up. Thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you to Stormforce for sending this out for me to look at, and I'll see you all in the next one.